As I mentioned, we're Chapman and Co. Leadership Institute. We're actually a company within Barry-Wehmiller itself. We're the only B2C facing company in the organization, and we work with organizations around the world to do kind of the stuff that Rhonda's going to talk a little bit about. Everything from assessing both your leaders individually to the overall culture. We do leadership development. We do training courses. The training courses range everything from inclusion to actual emotional intelligence. On the leadership development, we might do 360s or bring your senior team through some events that help them work a lot more efficiently as a team, to include strategic planning. We do the workshops and keynotes and consulting, especially these days, on crisis communication, managing and those type of communication activities. And so as we transition over, that's us. If you have any questions, we will share our email at the end of this. I'm going to ask Sarah to talk a little bit about Barry-Wehmiller, and then we'll get into Rhonda's introduction. Sarah?
All right. And so as the Chief People Officer of Barry-Wehmiller, I want to give you a little bit of background before Rhonda comes on about the organization. So Barry-Wehmiller, we're a capital equipment goods manufacturing company. And so what that means is we make all of the machines that make all the stuff that you see in the grocery store, labeled, conveyed, packaged, likely on a Barry-Wehmiller machine. We have about 12,000 different team members worldwide, spread in 200 plus locations in 26 countries. About $3 billion in revenue gives you a little bit of a sense of the size and the scale. And notably, and one of the questions that we'll definitely be asking Rhonda to talk about is the fact that we are a unique blend of 110 different acquisitions. So part of the Chief People Officer role is trying to figure out how do we care for people when the scope of the organization is as dispersed as it is, and all of our family members, all of those acquisitions are somewhat unique. So with that, we are going to introduce Rhonda to you, and we're going to do it in a little bit of a unique way. Certainly we could talk about her background, her degree in engineering, how she started in the organization, being sent off to job sites, how she's kind of navigated through multiple different departments within the organization. But instead, we're just going to give you a few facts, and she's already shaking her head. So the first one is, has been known to brush her teeth with Diet Coke. Yes, true. True. Okay, so Rhonda's just going to say true or false. So you're going to know that we're not lying. Number 2, mixes a mean cocktail. I can attest to that one. True. Number 3, she's raised 2 scholar athletes, 2 kids that have been affected by COVID, one high school senior, one college senior, so tragically missing their graduations. Number 3, has been known to hang with the CEO of Zappos, Hyatt Hotels, the Container Store, and the occasional professional athlete. She's nodding. That is true. It's true. And she's the youngest VP of sales in Barry-Wehmiller history.
Rounding
that was
out
a long
the
time
introduction.
ago.
Okay, we'll get to that. Rounding this out, she also is famous for saying, well, I hire people who don't need a boss. So if you ever ask her for something, hey, thinks black dress shirts make you look like you're, quote, going to the club. This is a direct quote.
I wore this for Matt today.
She's wearing one. This is why I am not wearing a black dress shirt. I guess you could make the rules. You don't have to appear by them. She is usually the last to leave the party, but she's also the first to breakfast. She'll beat you at golf, down the ski hill, and at bunco. I actually don't know what bunco is, but I'm sure that she would beat me at it. And this last one, make no mistake, she can fire you. This is a very short story. She and I presented at Conscious Capitalism, Ron and I did, and it was after that Simon Sinek and Bob Chapman had presented. Our MPS was hired, by the way. And afterwards, Simon and Bob were talking, and Simon said something like, well, you can't be fired at Barry-Wehmiller. And Bob gave a non-committal answer, and Rhonda whispered over to me, and she said, Matt, I can fire you. So with that, we're going to get to some Q&A with Rhonda. But before that, we're going to start with you, Sarah.
If you guys have been on our webinars before, you know that we like to interact and get to know a little bit of who is out there listening in. And we're going to do that using a tool called Mentimeter. I'm going to ask that you pull out your smartphone, or if it's easier, you can open up a second browser. Go ahead and put in menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code 880654. And we're going to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is easy. What company do you work for? So let us know who's out there. I already know that we have folks from the 49ers. We've got Shell, St. Edward's University, News Press and Gazette, which I believe is an organization in the Swift Communications umbrella, Plymouth Foam, our Stanley Cup winning St. Louis Blues, all good organizations that have logged in to hear what Rhonda has to say.
And also Rhonda's dog.
And Rhonda's dog.
Yeah, I'm texting my family, those two wonderful kids, and just say, please, someone come and get this dog. She just really wants to come into my office. I'm sorry.
All right, the second question that we have for you all to answer in Mentimeter. What word do you associate with HR? So we have a different name inside Barry-Wehmiller. We call it Culture and People Development. We don't have a vice president of HR. We have a chief people officer. So we do believe in renaming and using some more inspirational terms. But when you think about HR generically, perhaps in your organization, what is the word you associate most with HR?
And you can go ahead and put in whatever you'd like to put in.
Yes,
yeah, you can put in whatever you want to put in.
Were compassion and horrible at the same time. So
right.
We definitely see the spectrum.
And the profanity filter's on, so you can write whatever you want in there. If you miss the code, it's at the top of the screen here. It's 880654. Just go to menti.com. You don't need an app. Just open a browser. No data. It's hardly anything at all. 880654. Put in whatever word you associate with HR.
All right, we're seeing old-fashioned come in. Perhaps that's the term. Perhaps that is somebody's actual department. We see rules. Certainly HR perhaps is known for the compliance aspect of the job. Trouble, perhaps if I'm sent to HR, that is, I'm in trouble. It's like being sent to the principal's office. Comprehensive development, people resource. I like how somebody put in laws. Like it's beyond compliance. Like these are HR laws. So appreciate that. And we're going to get into, there is a spectrum and there's different ways that you can look at the help that HR provides to an organization and the role of HR inside the organization. Our next question.
Hey, Sarah.
For you all.
Sorry, just real quick. If any of you, I noticed on the screen, thank you, Jamie. If any of you have issues with Menti, just put it in the chat and Jamie will enter it for you.
All right, a little bit about where you're at right now, both from the standpoint of your business and how you're feeling. So I'm feeling right now optimistic. My team is great. Realistic, this situation that we're in, it's going to take some planning. Perhaps we're on the side of a little bit more pessimistic, or I'm not sure. I'm bouncing around and all of the above at times. So as we see these come in, as we've been on these webinars, this is coming in typically how it has been. Quite a few people who are in that realistic camp. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to take some planning. And then certainly people who are in the barbells. And this is to acknowledge we're all in a different situation. Some people are leading teams that are working from home, and some people are dealing with the stress of being an essential service or an essential business at this time. And so on that vein, let's talk to you about your business. After COVID-19, my business will be better than before, same as before, lower than before, or unsure. I'm not Nostradamus. None of us are. So these come in, and this has also been really interesting because you see that for some of us, we are really doubling down on some continuous improvement, some operational efficiency. We're trying new things out. This has actually been good for my team or my business. And a certain percentage that say, you know what, it's going to be very difficult to recover. And in the middle, a bunch of people who say, I can't predict, and it is just too difficult to call at this stage. And this is turning out very similar to that. And our final question.
And I think, Sarah, the one piece to pull out there is you can see by this, the lowest percentage is something's going to change. Higher, lower, not sure, but something's going to change because only a very small percentage, and this follows, we see very people saying it's going to be the same.
Right, since we do have Rhonda and her availability to us, you can hit her with your most pressing HR related concerns. So go ahead and put those in. We know it might take a few more seconds to type in what that concern is for you. And just like the Q&A, we will attempt to address what those concerns are. So the first few coming in: retention and succession, employee engagement in remote times. How do I serve all of those far-flung people? Safety as we reopen. So some people saying, okay, we're dealing with it right now, but then we have to look forward to the return to work. The fact that humanity is missing from business, perhaps. Leading and being okay with change, mental health of employees. We see safety cropping up again. Talent retention and development, and navigating a new normal in the work environment. If this is true, that something is going to change, how do we as people leaders navigate whatever the new normal happens to be? So appreciate you all putting in your concerns, and we hope to be able to at least discuss, if not address, a few of those as we move through the Q&A. So with that, we are going to turn it over to Rhonda. We're going to kick it off with a few questions. Rhonda, you born and raised in Missouri and by two strong parents. What qualities, and we're going to get to the business stuff and we're going to get to the COVID stuff, but what qualities, if you had to break it down, did you get from your family? What'd you get from your mom? What'd you get from your dad?
I would know if I break it down between my mom and dad, but I would say as a family, we are very direct and we don't hold a grudge. And I think as well, I think to, focus on the problem and not focus on the person. And it doesn't have to be personal. My family is really loud. So it's hard for people to believe that I'm the quietest one in my family. So I get that, but I think I'm the quietest one in my family, so that's not saying a lot. And I think a work ethic and resiliency, just that you can work your way through just about anything, I think is pretty common across my family.
It's a great one. And we're going to take it back just a few years. The newly graduates, you have a degree in engineering, and let's say you could go back right now and you could meet yourself as you're on graduation day. What advice do you give younger Rhonda?
I think it's interesting. I've had a unusual career trajectory, and I would say I had a few ideas of what I did and didn't want to do. And I think it's just let it be. I think I never had a plan of directly where I wanted to go, where I was going to go next. I really just took the opportunities that were in front of me and made decisions that felt aligned to my values, and it's worked out fine. So I think I would just tell myself, you're going to be just fine.
Let's go. We're going to get to the COVID topics that I know a lot of people want to hear about. But prior to COVID, if we can even remember what life was like, how would you articulate what your main priority was or your main focus was from a chief people officer standpoint? And then how did that ripple out into the organization? So what was most important to you in the role that you hold?
I think a big focus for us has been this theme of people and performance and harmony. And so, early on in Barry-Wehmiller's journey, we were trying to carve out something that was so different than what was done traditionally in business. And we created this cultural model that was really driven about caring for people. We measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. And so just this focus to start, a movement almost within our company and within the world eventually. And we always were driven to perform. We understand that the biggest way that we touch the lives of people is by having a business that creates a future for them, where they can grow and be part of something that's worth doing and be part of something that's valued. And so we really left it to people and leaders to navigate the middle of that. We had this people journey and this performance journey, and we didn't really help people understand how those two things came together. And so what we recognized is that the business is thriving, and we even see another level of performance for ourselves. And how do you help people lead and navigate people and performance and harmony? And not this idea that it's a balancing act that, because that kind of says that if people are up, then performance is down and vice versa. But this idea that if we do it well, we can bring those things together, and they're more powerful when people are fully engaged and contributing and understand how they're helping the business perform and driving that performance. So what we've been working really hard on is a new perspective on leadership development that really brings all that together, and to take an integrated approach to leadership development where we're very much integrating the heart of where we started, which is culture in our Barry-Wehmiller University leadership curriculum, but also with what are the experiences that people have, what does great leadership look like, and being even more explicit about bringing people and performance and harmony together and developing leaders that it's very vivid for them what they need to do, and we're going to help them be able to do that. So for us, that's probably been one of the biggest drivers, and figuring out how to take everything that we came to in the early days at Barry-Wehmiller and make it scalable. So we've become, I think even since we wrote Everybody Matters, the company's more than doubled in size. And so and we're so much more diverse with businesses all around the world and people speaking 10 primary languages plus a bunch of other ones. And so thinking about how do you take this very high touch model that we built and make it scalable and accessible to everybody in the organization. So those have been probably some of our big focuses coming into the COVID-19 experience.
We think about COVID-19, there's going to be probably, as we come out of this, as you saw in the Mentimeter, a lot of change. And so a lot of change, perhaps different mergers, perhaps different acquisitions. Barry-Wehmiller now a collection of family of 110 different acquisitions. I know you visited other larger organizations that started with something beautiful, like this idea, like everyone matters, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. And they have identical locations, and that's challenging for them to carry the culture over there. Barry-Wehmiller has very different businesses all over the world. From your perspective as the chief people officer, the leadership development, the culture, how do you even think about having that as a continuity across all those different acquisitions?
I think what we're recognizing is that it's a great journey that we've been on, but it's a complicated one. And so one of our big focuses now is to simplify a lot of the things that we've built into a few core cultural pillars that are non-negotiable. And so to ensure that everyone understands that we're hiring leaders for whom it's natural to lead that way, that we're making it very clear for people and things that don't take a lot of translation. And so there's some fundamental cultural pillars that are non-negotiables for us. And then to allow the only way that you survive and thrive in an organization that's 110 acquisitions is that you have to value and embrace what every single one of those shared histories brought to the table. And how do you allow that to thrive and to celebrate? And so it's sort of, there's a core that's non-negotiable, and then there's a lot of entrepreneurial freedom for people to apply that in a way that makes most sense. And that's true whether it's our leadership journey, business on a day-to-day basis, or COVID-19. Is that there's no one-size-fits-all Band-Aid that we're going to slap on this problem. We have to help people navigate it and help people understand how to act within the core of Barry-Wehmiller's culture, and then allow them to do the things that make the most sense, are most natural to them as leaders.
A question that has come into the Q&A, since we're talking about a little bit about kind of the early days and how this was formed, and then how do we bring it out into the organization. And the question is, who or what inspired you or the organization to do things differently than other businesses? Why go down this path in the first place?
I think it happened by accident. So anybody who hears Bob Chapman speak, he talks about a lot about kind of a series of realizations. And so I think it was, there was no one big aha moment. I think we had some learning experiences early days that really helped us understand, which is funny to think how surprising it was to us back then. Hey, if we lead differently, people are different in response. And so that I think was the beginning of, and then translating, I think probably started about 20 years ago when Bob was on this success to significance beginning of his journey. And just to start to translate that, the opportunity that we have with all the acquisitions is that you try something and it has an amazing response once, but then you get to try it again and again and again as you embrace all these new people and companies into your organization. And you find out that there's some fundamental philosophies that hold true, whether it's in Phillips, Wisconsin, or Duncan, South Carolina, or in Lucca, Italy, that there's fundamental things that people want and believe in and that they're inspired by. So I think it was really just an evolution and an ability to kind of allow business to connect with that deepest sense of right, that there's a right way to do things, and it doesn't have to be different just because you're in business. So I think that really for us, there was no one aha moment. It was just, and then the other thing I think that is that opportunity to ensure that we built a business that is sustainable and that can thrive in different times, so that you have this consistency of being able to be there for people and to create that future for them.
I know we're going to get into some specific more COVID type of questions, but maybe one thing about your role. So when you think about the role of the HR director or the chief people officer, what about having a seat at the table? Like a lot of people will talk about, hey, how does HR get a chance to have a seat at the table, get a chance to influence the C-suite? And in your position, you report directly to the CEO. So can you talk a little bit about that and the challenges and what advice you would give other people in your kind of role that have to report through an intermediary before they get into the leadership?
I think it's interesting when you think about a seat at the table. It's a little bit, I'll say, careful what you ask for, right? Because if I think about my own role, there's who's your team? Really, my peers, my team is the executive leadership team. And those are the platform presidents and the CIO and the CFO, the people that are responsible for the people in their care and running the business. And so you really have to have a mindset that it's not HR protecting the people against the business, right? Or protecting the business from the people. I think it's embracing that responsibility, that I'm as much responsible for the financial success of the business as I am for the 12,000 people in our span of care. And so, and I think that can be extremely challenging. What I tell younger leaders in our organization that ask, I tell them, do you understand how your business works? Have you been in the field? Do you understand the realities of what people out at the front lines of your business face, what it is that drives the business forward? What are the actual concerns? And so I think for me, I've been lucky to have grown up in the organization and been in a lot of roles where I've experienced that firsthand. And I think that gives me some credibility in the conversation. But I think people can build that credibility by getting out in the business and understanding the realities of how your business makes money, what the threats are, those kinds of things, so that you can be a credible business leader, not just a credible HR leader.
A couple of questions coming into the chat. Can you give some examples of what are those non-negotiables or those pillars in the culture? So how would we articulate, here are the kind of tenets that we want all Barry-Wehmiller leaders to subscribe to? And then a kind of a companion question to that, how long does it take for that kind of thinking to take hold?
So one of the most fundamental pillars that we believe in is the fundamental belief in people and the goodness of people and their capability, that people come to work every day wanting to do a great job. So if you respond from the context of believing the very best about people and that their intentions when they come to work every day are aligned to the organization, that shapes almost every decision that you make. Another fundamental tenet is open and transparent communication, sharing with people what we're doing, why we're doing it. Another one would be driving the business forward through improvement. And so I think we do expect people to be on a journey and to engage everybody in a journey to improve the business. And I would say, really recognition and celebration is probably the other one, is just to look for the goodness in people and hold it up, and make sure that people understand the value they're creating for the organization, how they're contributing. So there's some fundamental things that we think are core to who we are as an organization that don't change based on where you are, and they should shape all the decisions that we make. How long does it take for this to take hold? It's a daily challenge, right? So to some extent, in every journey, you have your early adopters. And when we started, we really focused on those people for whom this transition was very natural. And they bring along the naysayers. And so we have opportunities like we're in right now with COVID-19, like we were in 08, 09, where you really live your values and walk your talk, and you'll bring a lot of those kind of fence sitters along with you. And but I would say that, I always say culture is how you perform today at the edge of your organization on the worst day. Right? What decisions did you make? How was it communicated to people? How were people treated? And so the fact is that we got to work every day for this to continue to hold in our organization. So we're really just on the journey, and every challenge we face, every new acquisition, every opportunity that's in front of us is another chance to live up to who we say we are, or to fall short of that.
Which is probably a good transition into, COVID-19 presents some really, really unique challenges, especially for Barry-Wehmiller, that, as you mentioned, since we wrote the book, has doubled in size at least. So we qualify, or if I can use that terminology, as an essential business with some of our locations and some of our people, than others, corporate, the Leadership Institute, not an essential. So talk to us about that. How's it been going? What are you using to think through these decisions?
So anybody who's followed Barry-Wehmiller has heard a lot about our values and our cultural foundation. So let's just assume that that's in place already. So how do you actually respond once you have that foundation? And so there's really three things that I think about that are core to what we're doing right now to respond. The first is whether or not you have a problem-solving capability in your organization, and how does that position you to respond. Another one is, have you built an environment of responsible freedom? Because command and control is not going to work right now with everybody working from home. And the last one I would say is that culture of altruism. And so the first one, I would say problem-solving capability. So for our team, just to kind of shape, what's the Barry-Wehmiller experience been? We're global all around the world, and we have a manufacturing plant and acquisition that's rather new for us in China, as well as some sales offices in China. And then we have a big presence in Europe, about 3,000 people and a lot of small manufacturing plants. And then about 60% of our business is here in the US. And so China, we started experiencing COVID-19 in China in January, and when people were coming back from the Chinese New Year. And so we're learning and responding there, and then Italy, and then Germany, and then France, right? So we've been kind of following the response around the world. And so I think what's important is that we have this problem-solving capability, and we have a set of processes that we put in place that are serving us well during this time. And the first thing is there's a lean and continuous improvement philosophy, a phrase that we use a lot, say, do less, get more done, right? So the first thing that we had to do as we started to work on our response is to decide what we weren't doing, and to be explicit to the organization about what projects and programs needed to be set to the side, what timelines just weren't going to work, so that we could respond as we should in this environment. And then the second thing I think most people understand is that you always want to align your best talent to your biggest problem or your biggest opportunity. So it's really pulling people off of other projects and forming a task force for us around COVID-19, where you had people really working in their areas of strength. And one big example in that is I have a couple people on the team who are really great at change management. They were really led and coached by somebody who was great at that. They've moved on to other leadership roles, but I asked them to step back into this project to really handle change management as we work the team through that. And so just really putting everybody working in their area of strength, use your problem solving tools, use the processes. And so for us, that's really what's shaped our ability to respond in such a diverse organization. Does that make sense?
So a companion question to that, just from a little bit more on the tactical side, with recognition and celebration being such a huge core tenet of Barry-Wehmiller's, how have we applied that during the COVID? What are some of the unique things that we're doing to not just, yes, the problem solving, but how are we recognizing and celebrating during this time?
So we actually have, as part of that task, the COVID-19 task force, we have our leader of communications. And one of the things that we started with is, amplifying the positive. So we started a site to share stories of people who are supporting each other and customers through the challenges. And really, even for myself, I'm in the middle of this and I'll see the stories as they come across, but just step back and read through those and see the great things that people are doing for each other. And for our customers, who many of them, some of them make things that are obviously more essential than we thought, like toilet paper, and others of them are making, pharmaceuticals and supplying food to people and that kind of thing. So things that we're doing to support customers, but also it's great to be deemed an essential business, except that half your people have to go into the plant and work every day, and the other half are working from home. And so how do you make people feel valued and understand that keeping the office teammates home helps keep the people in the plant safer? So there's a lot to recognize and celebrate. We're doing yard signs and different things for our team members to really thank them for being on the front lines of our work and going into the plant every day to keep our customers running, keep our business sustainable.
Yeah, I would just add, as from a corporate level, those messages going out to all over Barry-Wehmiller, and then from a department or acquisition, as an example, the Leadership Institute, for every word we're highlighting every week on Friday, we're highlighting before we go into the weekend, here are all the great things that we did over the week. So just because it's remote doesn't mean we can't capture it. In fact, we probably want to turn and crank that stuff up. Rhonda, you mentioned the part about problem solving. And so a word that's been going around Barry-Wehmiller has been optionality. So if I'm going to take this problem solving with the ability for HR or the people team that you're leading to also impact the actual business, can you talk a little bit about optionality and how Barry-Wehmiller looks at that?
So I think, we have the one thing about having a strong culture and a cohesive team is that a lot of us were here during 2009 that are going through this again. And so you have the benefit of understanding how that rolled out for us. And for us, we started to see the impacts in the 2009 crisis financially much later than other businesses by the nature of how our business runs. And so just stepping back and saying what might happen to us based on that, what might the economy do, and making sure that, if you think about, if you go out on a journey, you have a lot of choices at the beginning, and every path that you pick or don't pick, your choices get narrow and narrow as you go down the journey. And so we just want to make sure that we don't narrow our choices so much that when we get into a crisis, potentially financially later, we haven't made the right decisions or created the right options for ourselves earlier on. So I think it's really just trying to understand and navigate where are the best solutions that serve our team members and the company the best, and when should we be looking for opportunities that, every country that we operate in is putting out extraordinary programs to help support companies and people through this transition. When's the right time to access those, and how do we ensure that we don't put ourselves in a position of financial crisis? So it's really, the nice thing for us is that you used the phrase seat at the table earlier, is that talking about people and the impact on people is always part of the conversation when we're talking about the financial future and the integrity of the company. So we always put those two things together and try to make the best decisions that serve all of our stakeholders.
The question in the chat is was there ever a difficult time in which the question says the principles in Everybody Matters, the cultural principles of Barry-Wehmiller could not be applied? Is there ever a situation where it's been difficult to show up in the way that we would want to?
Oh gosh, every day. So I think it's, even when you have to make the decision that you don't want to make, even when you have to take the action that wouldn't be the one that you would choose, there is a way in which you do that preserves human dignity, that puts the person in the best possible situation to land on their feet. So I think that there's no place where the principles don't apply. It doesn't mean that you don't have to make difficult decisions and do things that aren't popular or that you wouldn't want to do. We do make those decisions every day. It's not all rainbows and unicorns over here. But when we do them with as much care and consideration for the team member and allowing them to preserve their dignity. So when someone leaves Barry-Wehmiller for just about any reason, they don't get escorted out by security, right? And they don't, a lot of times when people leave the organization, we'll talk to them about, how do you want to craft your story on your exit in a way that makes it easy for you to land on your feet? And so there's sometimes people have to leave Barry-Wehmiller, sometimes we have to make difficult decisions, but you don't have to take someone's dignity in the process.
But do you mind, on that same vein, do you mind talking about when Barry-Wehmiller did an acquisition in China? That was a big step for a lot of reasons. Can you talk, you were on the early kind of, we're going to go out there, we're going to look at it and see it. I think that's a really good, from an individual perspective, and now from an organizational perspective, are we going to apply the same principles? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, for us, it was a very negative connotation that we had to get past, because what we see and things we've held up in other organizations is chasing low-cost labor to remain competitive. And so what we never want to be is a company that shuts down a plant and moves to, it used to be moving out of a union St. Louis to southern Arkansas where it was non-union, and then that wasn't cheap enough. And then someone would move to Mexico, and Mexico's not cheap enough, and then China, and then other parts of Asia. And so we never wanted to be an organization that just chased low-cost labor. And so there was a barrier for us to even consider this opportunity in the Chinese market. But it happened to be one where our executive in the region had a close partnership with Mr. Wu, who owned this company, and they worked together for 10 years to find a way for us to buy Mr. Wu's company. And so, and he was very excited in the end when the transaction finally happened, that the home that he had found for his organization. But for us, there's things that are just practices that are very different. And one is that there are dormitories there. So people live in dormitories on site. And we also had a really negative connotation of that. So I went on a trip over there just to explore and understand if we could be proud of operating a company in this region in China. And we made the decision to go forward with the acquisition. And we just said, we're just going to have to go on a journey. Everywhere that we are, depending on how long you've been with Barry-Wehmiller and where you started, people are on a journey to getting closer and closer, hopefully, to live in the culture that we envision. And that's the same thing we want in China, is to take people on a journey to help them grow, to get better at what they do, to become more and more competitive, to feel that they're adding value. And we had to really embrace the fact that what I learned when I went over there is the reason people live in dormitories is because we pay for their room and board, and they can send all of their earnings home to their families in the countryside. And so it's very important to them, that opportunity, and it's not some form of oppression, which was, I guess, my misguided interpretation when I first heard about it. So just got to get comfortable with the fact that we're going to, as I said earlier, apply our values in what makes sense uniquely in that situation in China. So, and the business is thriving and doing really well. And for those of you that are in a panic, like a lot of us are about the COVID-19, I can tell you that 90% of our team members are back in our plant in China and working, and we're shipping equipment out of there. So there's hope for the rest of us, I think, as we look ahead.
Thanks.
This question has come up both when we interviewed Bob Chapman, our CEO. It's coming up again in this Q&A, and it has to do with the role of the board in alignment with the executive team and what's their role in culture. And so for background, for those listening, Barry-Wehmiller is a privately held company. We do have an outside board of directors. We're not required to do so, but we do have one that their advice and counsel, what have you, is very influential. But how do they participate in the cultural conversation, or how do we get alignment between the board and the executive team on cultural questions?
I think for most of our board members, they are really proud of being part of Barry-Wehmiller, and they're proud of the culture and the recognition for the culture that we get out in the world. I think that we do have specific board members who are part of our team who joined to bring more of the people orientation, and then a number of them who really bring a lot of business expertise, and that's why they're there. And so I think it's interesting. They embrace the culture. They challenge us to ensure that we keep that harmony between people and performance. And I feel that they see their responsibility as a responsibility to the shareholders and to the integrity of the investment for the shareholders in Barry-Wehmiller. And so, and I think, and they also understand kind of our belief system and what the boundaries are for actions that we're willing to take in Barry-Wehmiller. So, so it's an interesting and challenging conversation, and they do help us find ways towards finding that, I guess what you call the third side, right? Where it's not like people performance, but is there a way to drive performance and take care of people at the same time? And they do challenge us, I think, to find the third side a lot of times.
Thanks, Rhonda. I'm going to give you two smaller questions that are a little more tactical, so two at the same time here. One, does Barry-Wehmiller look to promote internally first before you look for outside? And the second one, with all the companies cutting bonuses, reducing 401k match, eliminating monetary recognition schemes that mean to control cost, how do you make people, or how are you making people feel valuable?
The first question on the promoting from within, I think we're always better if we can promote from within. I think that people need to feel that they're growing and changing and contributing. The good news in the Barry-Wehmiller business is that because it is fairly dynamic with the number of acquisitions that we do, you don't have to change because the business is always changing to some extent. But we do want to promote from within. And I will say that that said, we did find ourselves in an inflection point. And I think that you find yourself in a $3 billion business, the complexity and what it takes to lead is a lot different than in the combination of a bunch of $100,000 or $100 million businesses that we used to have. So, so I would say that there are some places where we recognize that we would all benefit from adding some talent from the outside and to help take us all to the next level. And that's a challenge, right? So it's just, we know all the shortcomings of the people who we work with every day. We don't know the shortcomings of people, and we can never uncover all of them in an interview process. So for us, it's a process of getting good at hiring into some key roles from the outside, and then just to make sure that when we bring those people in, that all of us are learning from them and they take us all up. And so, so it's a combination of both. And I would say the goal is to promote from within into our critical roles 80% of the time in the future. And that's part of the new leadership development program that I was talking about, is to ensure that we put ourselves in a position to do that we have a more clear picture of what the future looks like and what the leaders are going to need to be in the future, and that we're building those kind of leaders in the organization through their experiences and the training and mentoring that they get.
Yeah, thanks. And the way to make people feel valued in a time like this, when a lot of the costs are being cut?
I think our team knows that we care for them and they're prepared to respond. I think for us, recognition and celebration doesn't cost anything. Communication, transparent communication doesn't cost anything. Celebrating the great things that people are doing, even if they're not the one recognized. If you do it well, it makes everybody feel great when they see a colleague recognized. And so I would say it's more challenging in the virtual environment with everybody disconnected. And so really in that space, it's important to make time for humanity, for the human space. And so allow time when every meeting starts for people to catch up and talk about what's going on. And I know I've seen more dogs and kids, and one of our colleagues had during a meeting, he had his camera on and he went and he picked up his infant daughter and put her on his lap. And then he quickly turned off his camera, and everybody on the meeting is like, wait, we want to see that baby. So I think it's just, you got to allow time in the day just to be human with each other and tell your funny stories. And, don't pack every meeting and every day just with back-to-back agendas. Make time for each other and to stay connected and to keep it personal like you would, in the lunch area, whatever it is in the office.
A question from the chat. Can you, what's your advice for somebody who, perhaps engineering, will broaden it, this person said, who is an engineer and wants to follow a unique path and perhaps end up in the HR space, but really for anybody who doesn't have a traditional HR background and wants to make the transition or go in that direction, what's your advice?
I think it depends a lot on the organization that you're part of and find those opportunities within the organization. I would say it happened to me quite by accident. I made a personal choice when my kids were little to spend more time at home, and that led me into a role where, through solving some problems in sales, I ended up learning a lot about culture. So I think it was just something for me that was very natural, and I didn't pursue it. It kind of just happened, and I, by aligning myself to things that I felt were important outside of work. So I don't know that there's any particular advice of how to turn an engineer into an HR person. I do joke that I'm a nerd whisperer. So having gone to engineering school and worked with engineers for so long, I speak their language. So in a company that's made up of a lot of technical people, it tends to be a skill that's valued.
Well, speaking of insulting and labeling people, I'm so glad Sarah left this question for me. This is a question in from the chat from JC. JC, thanks for being here and thanks for asking this question. Can you comment? I'm going to read it directly as he had because I think it's a perfect question. Can you comment about diversity and inclusiveness in BW, and what are the main challenges at the moment?
The biggest challenge for us is that our hiring is very focused on some technical skills, and the path to leadership in Barry-Wehmiller is very much typically through a very technical path. And so I think it's a challenge to build a more diverse organization when you're competing for this talent skill set that everyone's competing for. And so sometimes you're so happy to find the right cultural and technical talent fit, and then to also that you would wish you would have a choice of diverse candidates versus not diverse candidates. So for us, I feel like it's really the biggest challenge has been the nature of the work that we do, and trying to find talent to match our needs at all. So I think about things like electrical engineers and, certain skill set, field service team members and things like that, where we're doing the most hiring, tend to be really challenging skill sets to hire. So to me, that's the biggest one. And I think the other one is just to be more open about the barriers that we have between ourselves, regardless of whether or not, if it's race or sex or whatever it is that, those lines that we draw between each other. But I think for us, it's just to understand what actually does keep people from feeling included in the organization. And I was at a talk once at Work Human, and someone said, if you're a woman at the top of an organization, but you're just part of the old boys network, you really need to challenge yourself about that thought process. And I thought, well, that's me, right? Because I grew up in the organization. I am part of the old boys club. I got here on the traditional path of engineering and sales leadership in a time when the organization was like the Wild West. And so, if you had a brain, a pulse, and ambition, you could get promoted. And so, not necessarily in that order either. And And so so I came up in a very traditional way in the organization. So it's kind of hard for me to tell somebody, how do you get to here? I got here in the traditional way, and I'm part of the Old Boys Club. So I have to challenge myself with that thinking too, is just to think about, are we creating different paths for people to significant leadership roles in the organization than the one that most of us took?
And probably notable, just to at least comment, that by doing a lot of acquisitions, most of our talent acquisition, the amount we hire is lower. And so we're simply acquiring a group that already exists. So it makes those hires even more important to have that diversity mindset.
It is. And it's, but we do hire lots of people in Barry-Wehmiller every year. I mean, so it's more than you would think if you look at the numbers, just through attrition and other things. So there is an opportunity for us, but it's also, the field is fairly narrow. So maybe that's an excuse that we give ourselves about diversity. So I think it's always an opportunity for everybody to get better at that.
Rhonda, a couple more questions before we hit you with a lightning round. You saw the kind of polarity in the responses, the words that people associate with HR, and you have everything from basically it's kind of this principal's office mentality to this is the place where compassion exists in the organization. So what is one thing that you wish everybody knew about your job that they don't?
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, you have this responsibility as a member of the executive team for the business and everybody that is in your span of care within the business. And then you have your team that you're leading that, that really kind of, we say in Barry-Wehmiller, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. So we think about the people team is responsible for the way we touch the lives of people. And that's every policy, every leadership development course, every practice that we have in the organization. So the environments that we create. So it's kind of, we're responsible for the way we touch the lives of people. And that is as much a responsibility to the business thriving as it is to making people feel cared and growing and those kinds of things. So I think it's an awesome challenge to get to have in terms of a role. And it's also what can make it very difficult at times, is kind of navigating the duality of it.
Just one real quick one, sir, before we transition into that. It's a good question. It's very tactical, though. Have you had employees who cannot work or function due to the fear/anxiety of the COVID-19? And if so, how have you handled that?
Just stepping back a little bit to thinking about our response. And so early on, we're big on thinking about the end in mind, or, what's our vision for what's going to happen. And so what we knew early on is that we wanted to align all of our actions and policies and practices, that we wanted people to stay home if they're sick, to keep other people safe. We wanted to be transparent with us about their exposure. And we wanted to do what we could just to keep everyone safe. And so we really built all of our policies and practices around how we were going to handle things with that in mind. And so we do have people who have opted to stay home. And I wouldn't say necessarily in terms of mental stress, but general fear of they or someone around them has high risk should they be exposed to COVID-19, and trying to build policies and practices that take care of them and allow them to be at home. And so that's been an evolving process for us, both from a standpoint of understanding some of the government regulation that's coming out around the expanded FMLA and sick time acts, seeing where people can access those, understanding other policies and practices that we might align. So we do have people who are afraid to come to work, and so we've tried to accommodate that as best we can within the tools that are available to us through our own policies and through the government help. And we're also, in a lot of our communications, I talked about amplifying the positive in our weekly communication that comes out to people, reminding people about the tools that we already have in place on our well-being journey to help them with their mental well-being, reminding them that we have employee assistance programs that are available to them, and to try to help people stay well mentally as well as physically. But we do have probably in Barry-Wehmiller and several hundred team members who are at home because of risk or fear, who can't do their jobs from home, but who are staying home because of risk or fear of the pandemic.
Thanks.
All right, Rhonda, you know that Bob Chapman has a famous question, and I know that you know your answer to it, but we're going to ask it to you so that you can share your response with everybody listening. And if you get caught next to Bob at a dinner table, there's a high chance that he will ask you, what is it that you want to do with the time that you have left on this earth, and what does that have to do with working at Barry-Wehmiller? So how do you respond to that?
So Sarah's right. I do know my answer to the question because Bob plopped in a chair across from me in my office about 20 years ago and asked me. And so one of the things that then and now guides me is this philosophy of St. Francis de Sales, which is be who you are and be that well. And so for me, what he teaches is that you are given gifts and talents, and there is spirituality in living those out fully. And so for me early on, I mentioned that I made some choices to take a different role so I could be with my kids more, and understanding that part of the gifts that I have to give are not just at Barry-Wehmiller, but also as being a mom and a wife. And so over time, as Sarah mentioned, I have two seniors now, a senior in high school, a senior in college. And my growing role at Barry-Wehmiller, it's evolved to want to do that for other people. So how can you help people discover their gifts, apply their gifts, live them fully, and feel that they have been everything that they're meant to be in this world. And so that's really for me, for 12,000 people in our span of care at Barry-Wehmiller, for everybody that's touched by Chapman and Co., for still my two children and my husband, is to how can you live your life knowing that you use your gifts fully and helping other people use their gifts fully. So I'm still on the journey. I haven't done it yet. So that's been 20 years since Bob asked me.
Great. How about a few questions in the lightning round? I'm going to ask you just 3 quick ones. Sarah's going to finish off with the last 4. First one, best advice you ever received?
Best advice I ever received. Gosh, that's a tough one.
They call it a lightning round.
I don't have an answer for that one, Matt.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Never pet a burning cat.
There you go. Great. That's going on social media. Number 2, what's the worst job you've ever had?
Probably my first job at Barry-Wehmiller, when I lived in Mexico building breweries, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't actually speak Spanish as well as I thought I did. And I needed a boss. I didn't really have one. So that's probably my worst job ever.
All right. Favorite book?
Great Expectations.
What is one thing everybody should know about where you grew up in Missouri?
Oh, everybody in St. Louis wants to know where you went to high school. So for Matt and Sarah, who are not from St. Louis, if someone says, where'd you go to school? They don't mean Sarah WashU, they mean, where did you go to high school? And so, if you come to St. Louis and someone says, where'd you go to school? They probably mean high school, because they're trying to peg you based on what high school you went to in St. Louis.
Where's the place that you go to recharge when you're able to?
I think with my family, just anywhere. We've been golfing. You're allowed to golf now. So we've been golfing a lot, and that's nice to just be able to get out and be outside. And so probably the golf course right now.
If you had to go to dinner with someone who is living right now, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, my parents. I haven't seen them in a month, so that's really weird. They live here in St. Louis, and so I would go to dinner with my parents if I could right now.
And final piece of advice for anyone in the HR field during this time?
I think we have to see this as a tremendous opportunity. We can lead through this and demonstrate what caring for people and driving a business forward looks like. And it's a tremendous opportunity for us if we handle it well. I mean, I think it's a challenge for us. Have a very strong vision for how we want to live in Barry-Wehmiller, how we want to make decisions. And so I think it's a challenge to live up to that, but it's also just a tremendous opportunity for us who get the opportunity to have care for people as our main job.
Okay, that's a great transition point. So we need some feedback from you all. The first feedback we'd like to know is, what have you learned or will do differently as a result of listening to Rhonda on this interview, on this webinar? Not necessarily back to us, but we have 60 something people on here, some really smart folks in this area. So what have you taken from this that you're going to do differently in your organization? The reason we ask is so that you all can share to each other. I know that takes a little bit of time to put that into your phone there. If you'd like to put it in a chat, we'll have Jamie put that in here. But if you don't mind, just put a little bit about what have you thought about that you're going to do differently after listening to Rhonda for this one. As we wait for those to come up, just appreciate your time in being here. Appreciate Rhonda's time in being here as well. As you're finishing up putting those in, I'm going to launch a question that comes back to us as well. And that poll question is going to be just feedback on this webinar. You're going to see that in your Zoom room there on the Zoom screen. I'm looking to Sarah to confirm that it is in fact up. So if you don't mind, just give us 10 seconds of your time and give us feedback on that. And as we look at the Mentimeter here on the screen, people at the heart of respectful decisions, even more personal recognition while we are remote. Absolutely. Nothing stops you from writing a handwritten note, taking a picture of it and texting it to that person. Amp up that positive.
We're seeing, always looking for the goodness in people, what we can do within the COVID-19 time, seeing that as an opportunity to show people that we care, continuing to remember to be patient and kind and open, using this opportunity as an opportunity to shine. So that's a different frame and a different lens on what's the opportunity that COVID-19 presents for each of us.
We will be sure to provide all the inputs you're putting in here. We'll be sure to provide those by close of business today. As we wrap up today, I think one thing Rhonda's always done really well when she's leading the people team and thinking about Barry-Wehmiller is, are we just simply trying to mandate compliance using that hammer and really forcing that in the laws? And you saw that when we associated words with HR, or are we trying to inspire excellence? That one person is lifting another person up when they need to be. And so I think whenever we're thinking about writing policy or making some type of decree or decisions, are we really trying to mandate the compliance or inspire excellence? Thank you for the feedback. We have a Greatest Hits album. Some of you have been joining us on this. Our next two are next week, Becoming a Crossover Artist, How to Lead Through Change and Increase Resiliency, and the Accountability Playlist, 6 tracks to inspire your people to do more. So those are on Tuesday and Thursday. Next week, upcoming webinars that we have the president of the St. Louis Blues, Chris Zimmerman. We'll have him next Wednesday, and I believe that's Wednesday. And then the following Wednesday after that is Kristen Hadid, the CEO from Student Made, and someone that Rhonda has a close relationship with and has helped as well, author of the book Permission to Screw Up. So we hope that you can join us for those. My email and Sarah's emails are there. If we can help you facilitate your next team mini, do executive coaching, pivoting your strategic plan, or doing any custom webinars or training, we so appreciate you being here. We appreciate Rhonda's time. Sarah, if you want to close us out, and I will let people know that we will hang out, answer questions, and play some music.
Yep, just to thank you to Rhonda for her gracious give her time in a very role right now. We certainly appreciate it, and thanks to all of you for listening in.